Lack of data sharing between countries creates even more confusion in domestic and international water governance. China doesn't share the Brahmaputra water data frequently with their lower riparian states. Now, approach needed. Integrative approach. So, regional diplomacy should be emphasized sharing benefits through an integrative approach. All the trans-Himalayan and co-riparian countries must come together to adopt a system of water governance based on minimum international legal principles. Depending on the nature and the use of transboundary rivers, principles of equal and equitable, reasonable must be applied with human rights and environmental consideration for the river basin committees. Ensure proper stakeholder participation. To ensure proper representation of local users, all water commission must have a minimum number of representatives from the local communities, including in the transnational legislative mechanism. Transparency in data. Transparency will help for share benefits on the waters, building ideas of water peace rather than water wars. Then institutionalized mechanism, creation of multilateral mechanism in which all co-riparian countries and basins have proportionate power. Ideally, the body should have transboundary legislative power pertaining to the basin and its waters, and this body should be elected and representative. In this context, let's look at this map. So this is Mekong River, this is Myanmar, India, Thailand, and China. So China wants to build a dam on Mekong River. So this was the um, news that it built a dam on Mekong River. So Thailand and other countries, other riparian countries, lower riparian countries, are not getting the water in that amount. River water cooperation between India and neighboring countries. India's Water Treaty 196. It is an agreement on the cooperation between India and Pakistan providing mechanism to resolve dispute. Indo-Bangladesh Joint Rivers Commission. It was set up in 1972 by Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Peace. It was established with a view to maintain liaison in order to ensure the most effective joint effort in maximizing the benefits from common river system between India and Bangladesh. Ganga Treaty between India and Bangladesh 1996 is an agreement to share surface water at the Farakka barrage near their mutual border. Koshi Agreement 1954, Kandak Agreement 1959, Tanakpur Barrage Agreement 1991, and Mahakali Treaty 1996. These treaties have been signed between India and Nepal. These treaties provide for different withdrawal rights, constructions, and sharing of hydropower energy. India-Bhutan agreements. The cooperation between two countries is one of the major success stories of transboundary river water arrangements. India-Bhutan collaborated for the construction of Chuka Dam on Wangchu River. It helped Bhutan with low-cost electricity, and access is sold to India, which helped in its improved finances. India-China water data sharing. In 2006, India and China had signed a pact under which India would share hydrological data from May 15 to October 15 every year for the Brahmaputra and Satluj rivers. The two sides renewed the agreement in memorandums of understanding signed in 2013 and 15. So here is the river map of India, China, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. So there are several rivers and several rivers flowing in neighboring countries and shared by two or more countries. So this is the map. After that, some of the international treaties and best practices. So Berlin Rules of Water Resources. It is a result of revision of Helsinki Rules and other international law association rules on the uses of international water resources. Then United Nations Convention of Law on Non-Navigational Uses of International Watercourses 1997, dealing with measures of protection, prevention and preservation and management related to the use of watercourses and their waters. Treaty for Amazon Cooperation in 1978, signed for equitable sharing in North-South America between Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Guyana, Peru, Suriname, and Venezuela. Mekong River Commission, it is a major multilateral development in Asia for sustainable development of Mekong River, 1995, signed by Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Next topic is economy. In economy, we are going to study about national infrastructure pipeline. So let us look at this figure. Constituents of national infrastructure pipeline. Economic and social infrastructure project as per harmonized master list of infrastructure. Projects more than 100 crore per project. Greenfield under construction. Brownfield comes in development of completed project, then project under conceptualization, and then national infrastructure pipeline. So recently, Ministry of Finance released the report of Task Force on National Infrastructure Pipeline for 2019 to 2025 in the public domain. More on national infrastructure pipeline. India needs to spend 4.5 trillion on infrastructure by 2030 to sustain its growth rate. The government has announced the infrastructure projects worth 102 lakh crore will be implemented by 2025. National Infrastructure Pipeline seeks to implement streamline this in an efficient manner. To draw the NIP, all the economic and social infrastructure projects as per the harmonized master list of infrastructure was taken up and the projects have been identified. This first of its kind exercise is expected to be followed up by a periodical review process. Importance of infrastructure sector. So boosting the economy. As in India's ambitious to sustain high growth trajectory depends on infrastructure for various economic activity and growing population. Both public and private investment depend on equality of infrastructure in the country. Infrastructure development can also plug the inefficiencies in the process, which, as per the experts, cost 4 to 5% of the GDP. Improved governance. Well developed infrastructure enhances level of economic activity, creates additional fiscal space by improving revenue base of the government, and ensures quality of expenditure focused on productive areas. Create employment opportunities, as quality of infrastructure is among the biggest hurdles in improving India's manufacturing capacity. Consequent generation of employment. Improve global competitiveness, as infrastructure bottleneck is primary constraint in terms of India's competitiveness as reflected by World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Index. India's rank is overall infrastructure quality is 70 out of 140 countries. This rank falls to above 100 in the areas like water, electricity, utility infrastructure. Build investor confidence, as identified projects are better prepared and exposures like less likely to suffer stress given active project monitoring by competent authority, thereby ensuring better returns. This improved confidence leads to better prepared projects, reduce aggressive bids and failure in project delivery, ensure enhanced access to sources of finance, improve ease of living, as in order to fulfill various sustainable development goals, India needs to develop reliable, sustainable, and resilient infrastructure in both regional centers and transboundary areas. Realize potential of growing urban economy in required areas such as redevelopment of slum neighborhood, urban roads, water supply coverage and quality, wastewater treatment facility, and urban mobility through public transport. Major constraint in infrastructure sector. First, availability of funds for financing large projects. Given the limited fiscal space with private sector and twin balance sheet problem of Indian economy with over leveraged companies and bad assets of banks. Also, corporate bond market is undeveloped and there is absence of efficient credit risk transfer mechanism such as securitization, credit derivatives, credit insurance, etc. Regulatory uncertainty due to various risks which include procedural delays, lengthy process in land acquisition, payments of compensation, environmental concerns, lesser traffic growth than expected, etc. Due to these, the sovereign wealth and pension funds do not fund investing in Indian infrastructure, an attractive option. Weak enforcement framework. India is currently ranked 163 out of 190 countries when it comes to enforcement of contracts. There are cases when a developer enters into agreements without any intention to honor it as they do not fear enforcement of contracts. Delay in Indian infrastructure projects, leading to time and cost overruns in implementation phase. A comparison between Indian and Australian PPP models for infrastructure project could be analyzed. First, Australia's predefined criteria for infrastructure bid process have a time frame of 15 to 18 months from initial interest to financial closure. India's Swiss challenge model to redevelop 23 railway stations had a time frame of 30 months as the government had to wait for 18 months to award bids and 12 months more for financial closure. What are the major recommendations of the task force? Journal reforms. First is improving project preparation process through a framework which consists of transparent legislative framework, empowered public institution for infrastructure planning, model guidelines and standards, well-defined workflow and enabling special process vehicle. Second, enhancing execution capacity of private sector participants through a clear and consistent policy framework and collaboration with strong global infrastructure developers to achieve the required competence and execution capacity. Third, enhancing ease of doing infrastructure project through single window approval, mandatory conditions before award of contract, effective resolution of contract using mechanism like power purchase agreement. Fourth, using technology such as creation of public data sources for adequate data privacy framework, enabling database policy decisions, creation of smart infrastructure based on advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, virtual reality cloud, etc. Then strengthening infrastructure quality by transparent procurement process, sound governance over the life cycle of project and realignment and alignment with social and environmental sustainability. Disaster resilience by adopting the knowledge and expertise through the coalition of disaster resilient infrastructure, environmental sustainability by adopting appropriate carbon pricing to stimulate low carbon investment in energy, transport, and other infrastructure in the requisite scale. Promoting competition by speeding antitrust resolution mechanism, greater collaboration between CCI and sector regulators, operationalizing the national competition policy. Regulatory environment through equitable allocation of risk in PPP, standardization of contracts, and autonomous regulation in non-infra sectors that are going in for PPP mode of implementation. Financial sector reforms. First, attracting foreign and private capital into infrastructure, aligning investment guidelines to a long term nature of infrastructure project, such as for patient capital, that is, insurance and pension funds. Second, revitalizing the bond and credit market by establishing of a well capitalized credit enhancement institution, governing reforms in India, Infrastructure Finance Company Limited. Third, strengthening the municipal bond market in India by improving financial discipline and regular disclosure, augmenting revenue base and buoyancy of revenues of local government, addressing gap in credit worthiness of local government through innovative credit enhancement structure and encouraging pooled bond insurances. Revitalizing asset monetization through the sale of land non-operational asset through a long-term ease with significant upfront lease payment, the toll operate transfer model of operational road asset infrastructure investment trust in INVITs, sale of portfolio of assets to strategic financial investors, loan asset monetization through securitization, enabling user charges to finance infrastructure through autonomous regulation of tariff, regulation by contract with price regulation, provisions mentioned in the contract itself, and multi-sectoral regulators for regulation across infrastructure. Then, infrastructure financing, capital markets. The setting up of proposed credit enhancement guarantee cooperation be expedited, and government should reform the pension and insurance system to achieve savings in these sectors to at least 30% of GDP by 2025. Second, right institution for right stage of project finance. To bridge the funding gap, it is imperative to develop a new class of investors who can bring in patient capital from insurance companies, pension funds, and provident funds. DFIs with better credit appraisal skills. Development finance institutions should have required domain expertise and project appraisal skill. The government may consider a differential licensing system with enabling regulatory framework to encourage setting up of DFIs in the infrastructure sector with domestic or foreign capital. External aid. The ministries and the regulators should simplify the procedural aspect of FDI investment in infrastructure by sovereign wealth funds and global pension funds, improving the ease of investing. Monitoring and evaluation. So, project under implementation will include the following measures: resolution of key issues stalling progress, required intervention and responsible party, timely action to be taken by concerned stakeholder as per the governance structure and escalation metrics provided. Projects achieve financial closure but yet to draw down funds, establishing project monitoring tools for various project milestone, cost and time. Establish steering committee comprising representative from stakeholders such as lenders and equity investors and assign responsibilities. Then fourth is project under development. Delegate powers to special purpose vehicles and hire competent measures. Design proper risk mitigation strategies. Project as conceptualization state. Map key clearances, environment, CRZ, forest clearances, etc., along with land acquisition, technology choice analysis, disaster resilience, inclusiveness, etc. Then, how we conclude, a well planned national infrastructure pipeline will enable more infrastructure projects, power business, create jobs, improve ease of living, and provide equitable access to infrastructure for all, thereby making growth more inclusive. Revised FDI policy. Why in news? Recently, India's Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade revised its FDI policy in order to curb the possibility of predator foreign investment exploiting the financial distress of COVID 19 hit Indian companies. More on news. In the last 5 years, Chinese investment in India has drastically increased from US 1.6 billion in 2014 and at least US 2.26 billion 26 billion in 2019, both current and planned, in particular in technology and startup agreement. In light of this, it was anticipated that Chinese entities would take advantage of economic slump caused by COVID-19 outbreak to rise its stake in Indian entities and companies, exposing them to hostilities and opportunistic takeovers. To avoid such situations, FDI policy had been revised to curb opportunistic takeovers and acquisition of Indian companies, raising Chinese investment and related concerns. Since until 2014, net Chinese investment in India was and bilateral trade relationship was highly transactional, limited to the imports and exports, and there was a negligible interdependence. However, 2014 marks the entry of Chinese private sector at large scale in India and subsequent influx of Chinese capital and investment in infrastructure, automobile, energy, real estate, consumer goods sectors. Since then, Chinese investors have invested around 4 billion into 90 setups in India and 18 of the country's 30 unicorn startups that are funded by Chinese investors. While there are benefits in pursuing investment from China in terms of capital hungry Indian startups, which can be benefit from experience and technological know-how of Chinese companies that can achieved a bigger scale and success in their own home market in similar vertical. But concerns need to be considered as well. Concern associated with these investment. Concern with such penetration is data security, propaganda, and platform control. China's state-owned enterprises SEO provincial government were source of around 50% Chinese investment in India. These have become an important tool in Chinese diplomacy. Also, it is difficult to differentiate between private sector and SOEs as many times they are indirectly related. These investment, including the private sector investment as a part of China's Made in China 2025 plan. This plan is aimed at acquisition of technology. This is evident through the investment in Indian technology startups like Paytm by tech giants like Alibaba. Chinese investment scrutiny mechanism may not be a robust in developed countries. For instance, as September 2019, US, Australia, Japan were among the countries that have blocked Huawei, a private sector giant with close state ties, from their 5G plans. India has not taken a final call, although it has allowed Huawei to participate in initial 5G trials. Increasing investment in sensitive areas such as news services, fintech services, etc., can be detrimental in context of privacy of user data and data security. For example, ByteDance, which plays a key role in censorship of China, has invested 25 million in India's news aggregator Daily Hunt. Changes in FDI policy. The present policy states that non-resident entity can invest in India subject to FDI policy except in those sectors and activities which are prohibited. Additional provision. A citizen of Bangladesh and Pakistan or an entity registered in both countries can only invest under government route. Additionally, for Pakistan sectors, activities such as defense, space, economic energy are prohibited for investment in addition to the sector activities already prohibited. The amendment policy states that an entity of a country which shares a land boundary with India or whether beneficial owner of investment into India is situated in or is a citizen or is a citizen of any such country can invest only under the government route. This implies that the source scope of above mentioned additional provisions has been expanded to all other neighborhoods, including China. The government has refrained from explicitly mentioning China. Additionally, the amendment also states that the transfer of ownership of an existing or a future FDI is an entity in India, directly or indirectly, resulting in the beneficial ownership falling within the restriction imposed by the above rules, will also require government approval. The guideline was created to check multi-layered transaction which trace the beneficial ownership to the seven land border sharing countries. This implies that private equity investors and venture capital funds that have investment from China or any other land boundary sharing country will also need prior approval before they make any investment, even once they have already been pledged. Challenges in the implementation of the policy. Impact of funding for startup. Funding for unique or smaller startups may be a hit as several investors may get discouraged if asked to go through government route. For example, upcoming funding rounds of India's top startup unicorns such as Paytm, Zomato, Big Basket, Dream11 may get deep dampened. So, more clarity needed. Further clarification is required on the reporting mechanisms and identification of beneficial ownership structures, such as percentage of holding to ensure full compliance. China alleges flaunting of norms. China states that barriers created by the policy for investors from specific countries violate WTO's principles for, for non-discrimination. India's stand. India had categorically denied China's allegation regarding its FDI policy. India has given following reasoning. The revised policy neither restrict market access nor national treatment, the two tenets of global trade, and is thus not violate any rules of the WTO. On investment front, the measures does not fall within the illustrative list of the Agreement on Trade-Related Investment Measures, that is TRIMS, which details the measures that are inconsistent with the obligation of national treatment. Spillover on neighborhood relations. Expansion of restriction to all land border sharing countries may indirectly affect the FDI from countries such as Myanmar. Way forward. Chinese investment in India has the potential to rebalance an extremely loop-sided trading relationship. Although Chinese stakes are increasing in Indian companies, India has also emerged among the key overseas market for Chinese companies, which can better be leveraged by India's trade strategy to balance the trading relationship to secure market access for Indian firms in China. In the light of this, there is a need to strike better balance between creating a friendly, open, and predictable investment environment in one hand and safeguarding longer term consideration of security and privacy on the other. So, in this context, we are going to read about FDI in automatic versus government route. Under the government route, foreign investor has to take prior approval of respective ministry and department. Through automatic route, the investors just has to inform the RBI after the investment is made. Also, proposal involving FDI exceeding 50 billion are placed under the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, irrespective of the sector of the country. Sectors in which FDI is prohibited: lottery businesses, gambling and betting, chit funds, Nidhi company, trading in transferable development rights, real estate business including construction and re-ITs, manufacturing of cigars, chariots, cigarolios, and cigarettes, sectors not open to private sector investment such as atomic energy, railway operations, etc. So, after this, we are going to read about COVID 19 and poverty. So recently, United Nations University released the report titled "Estimated Estimate of Impact of COVID-19 on Global Poverty." So more on news. India has an estimated 812 million poor people, which could increase to 915 million due to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. As per the projections in the report, the worst case scenario. This is based on World Bank's poverty line for lower middle income countries, which is $3.2 per day. Impact of COVID. First, large scale informal sector. As per the International Labour Organization, around 400 million workers from India's informal sector are likely to be pushed deeper into poverty due to following reasons. First, due to strict lockdown measures in the government, larger number of workers have been forced to return to rural areas. Second, decline in quantity of work in terms of employment and number of hours. Third, decline in wages by some employers to avoid layoffs. So, The second impact is reduced source of income due to following reasons. First, decline in income of self-employed due to reduction of economic activity, sales and production in micro and small enterprises due to fall in demand and disruption in supply of inputs. Second, decline in domestic remittances from urban migrants to their household in rural areas. Next is many people just above the poverty employed in the gig economy are at the risk of slipping into poverty. There is absence of adequate safety nets like saving and insurance cover. They might force the poor to indulge in activities like sale of productive assets with long-lasting negative